Hey everybody, welcome to Stamping with Melva. I'm Melva Peters and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in British Columbia, Canada. And you can find me online at stampingwithmelva.com. It's Tuesday tonight, getting my mixed up in my days. It's Tuesday tonight, and I'm here with another sketch challenge for you. So if you get my newsletter, you would have seen the sketch already. I show you the sketch that I'm going to use. If you don't get my newsletter, you can go to my blog at stampingwithmelva.com and you'll be able to sign up for my newsletter. But in either way, I'm going to play with the sketch, and then the sketch will actually go live on Instagram and Facebook in about a half hour's time if you missed any of the measurements or want to grab a copy of the image so that you can play with this sketch. It's a pretty simple sketch, but I'm going to do some things that I think will be kind of make a really elegant card with it. Last week, if you watched, I did a card using where I tore designer series paper, and I'm going to do that again tonight. But I talked a little bit about kintsugi, which is a Japanese art of, and I may have this not quite right, but what they do is they repair china or porcelain, and then they add a gold line to it as there, so it actually looks like it's not just a repaired or broken piece that they fixed or decorated. So I'm going to do the same technique. We talked a little bit about it last week, where you can, instead of leaving the torn edges as the white core center, you can use Versamark and gold embossing powder to make it look a bit kintsugi-like. And this is a bit of a precursor, I guess, prequel to a new suite that's coming in the annual catalog that I absolutely love, that is based on kintsugi. It might be called Kintsugi Impressions. We haven't been able to order it yet. I'm so excited for when it will be available on May 6th. You'll be able to get your hands on it at the same time I will. So this is a little bit of a prequel to that suite that's coming. So we're going to play a little bit with torn designer series paper with some heat embossing, and we'll see how this card turns out. All right, I'm going to switch over to my desktop. All right, so just checking to see who's here, who's commenting. I'm not seeing any comments on Facebook, but hopefully I see some people watching, and so make sure you let me know where you're watching from. Leave some comments. Okay, so like I said, a pretty basic sketch. So your cardstock is 5.5 by 8.5 or 4.25 by 11. Your first layer is 4 inches by 5.25. I'm going to add an extra layer in just because of the gold that I'm using, and I'll show you that. And then I've said 5 pieces that are about 1.5 inches by 5.25. Great way to use up your designer series paper. I've made them a little bit wider than probably they appear on here because we're going to tear them, and so they will be a little narrower than the 1.5 inches once you tear them. 1.5 inches by 4 for the matte layer for your sentiment, and then 1 inch by 4 for your sentiment layer. You can switch those up or make them a little bit narrower or wider depending on what sentiment you're using. So that's the measurements. So what are we using? Oops. Oh, that's not good. I've got a piece of basic black that's already got some score lines on it, but that's okay. We'll just use it and rescore it. You won't see it too much. So I've got a piece of basic black that's 5.5 by 8.5. I've got a piece of basic white that's 4 inches by 5.25 for the inside. And then I've got a piece of basic white, the same, 4 inches by 5.25 for the front. And I cut a piece of gold foil that is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. So you get just a little peekaboo of the gold. And then I have my layers. So that's that matte layer, and then my sentiment layer gonna go across. That one needs to be trimmed a little bit. And then I've got, this is the designer series paper that is the Botanical Textures, I believe it's called. It's one of the new online exclusives. And I just love it. I've used it a fair amount, and this is what we're gonna cut. So I cut 2 of the one with the leaves. I kept the kind of the blacker, darker pieces, 2 of those and then 1 of those. So we'll kind of switch them up and tear them. Okay, so let's leave those. We're gonna work on our pieces first. So I'm just gonna take and tear. Now, if you want to, you get the core, the white core showing. You tear towards you, and you can see you're getting the white core of the designer series paper showing. So, and it doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm just going to take and tear my pieces. I like it not quite perfect, not at all perfect. How's that? So we're just going to take and tear. And if you actually kind of rip it, as opposed to sort of, I'm kind of doing it in these, you know, jagged edges, or I'm kind of doing it little bits at a time. But if you just take and tear, it'll be a little bit straighter if you want that. All right, so I've got my pieces torn. I'm going to get my, that's the one. Get my heat tool ready. I've got my gold embossing powder, and I've got my Versamark pad here. So to do this, I'm just going to take my Versamark pad and run it down just that kind of torn line of my designer series paper, and then get your gold embossing powder and just sprinkle it down that edge. And I'm going to do them all rather than kind of one at a time. So I'm just kind of rubbing it down that torn edge. Such an easy technique to do. I'm sure kintsugi itself is way harder than this. Like that. Now I've seen this technique, and in fact I've done this technique where you actually take a piece of designer series paper and you tear it into not tiny bits. I think I took a piece that was about 4 inches by 5 1/4, and I tore it into 4 or 5 pieces. And then you do this same technique on those edges, so it looks like you have the kind of kintsugi repair going on. And then when you glue those back together, and that definitely looks like kintsugi. Okay, so I've got my gold embossing powder, and you can do more or less than I'm doing. I'm just kind of adding a little bit of Versamark. Tap, 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 tap. Okay, I'm going to use my gold embossing powder again for my sentiment, but we will take and I'm going to try and find my, there, my tweezers, so I don't burn my fingers. This is heat tool. Oopsie, gets really hot. All right, so we're just going to hang on to this, and then we're going to take our heat tool on high. Get my cord untangled. All right. So we're just going to hold our heat tool over the gold embossing powder until you can see, hopefully, let's see, maybe you can see, it'll start to go from that dull matte finish to be shiny and glossy. And once it starts to do that, you can continue to move your heat tool. So now I've got my first piece done. Tweezers just actually help to hold it down. All right, piece number 3. This one's got a little bit less of the embossing powder on it, but I think it'll still be fine. Turn that off in between because my pieces are actually blowing blowing here and I don't want them to. So there we go. Let's get that into the camera. So once your heat tool gets, oopsie, dropped my everything, gets up to temperature, it doesn't take long at all for the embossing powder to melt. And once it does start to melt, you can just kind of move it across. Don't leave it in one spot for too long because it will start to soak into the paper. Okay, there we go. So we've got all of our designer series paper done, and so now we can bring in a piece of the basic white cardstock, and we're just going to layer these. So like I said, I did 2 of one pattern and 1 of another pattern. So that's how they're going to go across. So we're going to just overlap them. So we're going to start with the one on the right hand side because everything is going to go overlapping of that piece. I'm going to have a little bit of white showing on that edge. I think in my sketch I had more showing, but it was hard to know how I was going to actually tear my pieces. So it'll go like that. It's quite striking actually with that gold edge, and a bit almost looks like a ruffle, which is kind of fun, probably because I'm not getting my glue right to the edges, which is kind of intentional. Otherwise I get it all over my fingers. And the last one will go right up against that edge as well. There, I think that's quite pretty. And then we'll put our piece of gold will go across like that and the sentiment on top. So let's bring in our piece of cardstock. So we'll score this in half at 4 1/4. And use our bone folder to give it a really good burnish. Now, my piece of gold, oopsie, this piece isn't even, I'm going to have to grab another piece of basic black. Stay tuned, I will be right back. Okay, let's do this again because that piece wasn't even the right size. Not even. So we'll cut this to be 5 1/2 by 8 1/2. There we go. Now we've got, and then we'll score it at 4 1/4. Now we've got the right size for our card base. So again, fold into the mountain or the raised line. So my piece of basic white, I said, was 4 inches by 5 1/4. So I cut this piece of gold foil to be 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. So you get that, just that peekaboo of gold around the edge. And this will go on like that. So you got a peekaboo of gold, and on one side you got just a peekaboo of white. I love this paper, and every card I seem to be making with it is black and gold for some reason. It's just calling out to me to be black and gold cards. Okay, so that's my card base. Very pretty. So I've got a piece of gold that I cut, what did I say, 1 1/2. I actually cut it 1 1/2 by 4 1/8 because I made it match the size of my gold. And then I've got my piece of white, and I need to trim this to be the same width. So this needs to be 4 1/8 as well. And we're going to stamp. I'm going to use, this is one of the new stamp sets called Sentimental Framing. It's in the new, it's either an online exclusive or in the new catalog. It comes with a set of rectangle dies that make frames. So the sentiments are called, hey Holly, are called Sentimental Framing, and then the rectangles that go with it make frames that you can use. Just a lot of great sentiments. So I'm going to use the 2 sentiments that say, I'm so grateful to have you in my life. That'll go on the inside of the card. So I'm going to stamp and emboss on the white with gold. So I've got my embossing buddy. Just turn it over, use my embossing buddy. And then with Versamark, we'll stamp the I'm so grateful. Hopefully I can get it in the middle. Oops, come on, come on. There we go. And again, my gold embossing powder. I was going to do it with black as the layer, the sentiment layer, but I decided that the card is quite dark, and so I would use white for the sentiment layer. And again, grab your tweezers so you don't burn your hand. And then just hold that heat tool until it starts to melt. And you'll see it go shiny, start to go shiny and glossy, and you know that it's started to melt. And then you can start moving it across your sentiment. There we go. Still one of the very cool things. I absolutely love heat embossing. Okay, so this piece is going to go on like that, and I think I'm going to use dimensionals. It's quite a wide, long piece, so we're going to kind of zigzag the dimensionals so that it doesn't wobble and sag in the middle. And then this can go on to that matte layer of gold. Oops, my gold is just a little bit longer than this, so let's take and trim that. And then this is going to go on. I'm going to just glue this flat because it's got a lot of dimension already. That. Okay, and I've got a piece while that's drying. It doesn't take long to dry. I'm going to stamp that on the inside using Tuxedo Black. And this says, to have you in my life. Like that. Just really simple on the inside. If you wanted to do another one of those layers with the gold embossed edge, torn layers, you could absolutely do that. But we'll just keep it really simple with a sentiment. Okay, and of course now we need some, I'm going to trim that. That little bit is bothering me. There we go, now you can't see that. So I need some embellishments. So I pulled out these are the adhesive backed metallic gems. I think I have some gold ones. I do. They come in gold, silver, and copper. And I've used a lot of the gold. In fact, I have none of the little tiny gold. So we'll use all of the bigger ones. Now, I'm going to put these all on the white just because I think you're not going to see the gold as well if I put it on the black layer. All right, there we go. My Kintsugi inspired card with those torn edges and then the embossing on that torn layer. I think that's quite an elegant looking card and very easy to do. And what a great way to use up your designer series paper. I don't know, I have so much, and I have always little bits, and so it's a great way when you find something that you can use those little bits for. All right, everybody, thanks for joining me tonight. Now, I won't be live again till next Tuesday night with another sketch challenge. I'm off to do a weaving retreat, so if you do follow me on Facebook, stay tuned for some pictures of the weaving retreat. It'll be lots of fun, but I will be back live on Tuesday night at 6:30, so hopefully you can join